You're tuning in to Neurodiversity, a podcast for neurodivergent adults and the people who love them. Please note that this podcast does not substitute medical or professional diagnosis and advice. What's up, lovers and friends? Welcome back to Neurodiversity. So, I've been doing some work on myself per usual, right? And one thing that's really been important is asking for help and asking for what I need. Not just assuming that people will know or just assuming that people will make it a priority, because people have their own lives and their own things to deal with and worry about and enjoy and all of that. And so them not knowing or anticipating my needs may not be personal. So that's something that I've been working through, and in the spirit of doing better once you know better, I am asking you to share this podcast. So if you know a neurodivergent person, if you know someone who may be in a relationship with a neurodivergent person, just share this podcast if you think it may help them. Alternatively, if you can subscribe, if you can rate the podcast, that really helps to get the message out there. My goal is really to grow a global audience, and it will happen. It is going to happen, and I appreciate your help along the way. So today we're going to talk about RSD, or Rejection Sensitive Dysphoria. So before we get into it, though, it's important to keep in mind that RSD is not a medical condition or like a diagnosable condition. It is just an experience that is very common in neurodivergent populations. Particularly, I see it most talked about in relation to ADHD. But I don't have evidence that supports that it only comes with ADHD. I imagine with many divergent conditions, obviously, we experience rejection and have differences and things that we may hide, and so we may have more sensitivity to feeling rejected. All right. So RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria, it is an intense state of emotional dysregulation. So the word dysphoria actually, oh gosh, I don't know what language it's in. Is it Greek? It might be Greek. Don't quote me on that. I will post an article though in the show notes. But dysphoria, the Greek of dysphoria, actually means unbearable. So if you put that in context with gender dysphoria, that means like that gender that you has been subscribed to you is unbearable for you. Body dysphoria, like, being in your body may feel very, very unbearable or dysphoric. So those are actually diagnosable conditions. So in the same way, feeling rejected feels unbearable to you, and that rejection that you may perceive, your threshold for perceiving that rejection will be very low. All right. So it's this unbearable emotional pain in response to either real or perceived rejection. So the rejection doesn't have to actually have happened, and I'm going to tell you a story in a second about that. But RSD is very quick. It's sudden. It's like a whirlwind. It just kind of takes over. And you may have a trigger like, the real or perceived rejection, like criticism, teasing, even if it's like playful teasing, right? Like I told you, like in one of the last episodes, that when I was hanging out with my friend Nikki, like he was like teasing me about like not being able to paint my nails, and it's just like a fact. It's this objective fact that I am absolute trash at painting nails. But like I just felt like criticized, and I just felt like embarrassed because, well, that's my own work to do, just kind of like holding these notions about maybe like what it means to be a woman, or like maybe I should be able to paint my nails, blah, 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 blah. And honestly, like the whole nail painting thing, like not that anyone needs to be able to paint their nails, but like for me, I also have like fine motor issues. So like just holding myself to like unrealistic standards, right? Yeah, other triggers can also be like negative self-talk. So I might switch the order in which I release this. We'll see. But there was an incident that happened that same summer as the Great Unmasking, which I'm going to get into in an episode. So you may have already heard it, or if you didn't, you will hear it soon. And my negative self-talk actually really set off. I didn't have like a full-blown RSD, or like I didn't like actually like have a meltdown with it, or even a panic attack. Well, until later. I guess that's not true. Later that day, I actually did really break down and like cry. But like in the moment, I guess I kind of kept it together. But it was rough. So I'm gonna come back to that story. But I want to say for clinicians, I think it's really important for clinicians to be aware of RSD because we're human, right? And even in our humanness and even in our educational training, we can really bring in biases. And I've been on the receiving end of that. And I'm sure I've been on the giving end of that as well. And so just being careful and of what your boundaries are, or like what you choose to be an issue. Like for instance, like if someone comes to my session and like they're eating, like I'm not about to give them a hard time about that. Like this is their time, and if they need to eat at the same time, like it is what it is. Unless we're doing something very specific, like some sort of somatic work where they need to like not be eating, then fine. Just things like that. Like I try not to and I try to be careful of potential criticisms in the sense of like maybe leading that person or having them kind of come to the realization around their behavior. And that's what therapy is really, right? But I do see that sometimes, especially as we transition in the therapeutic sphere, that we can move away from just kind of listening and guiding in a supportive way, and we can move more into like education, which is a part of therapy. So that's psychoeducation, but we can move more into like advice giving, I guess. And just really caution that, especially if you're working with neurodivergent populations, really make sure, because what you may even be judging, like you might not understand. So like they might need to do that thing that way for particular reasons, you know. I don't have a specific example at the moment, but just keep that in mind. I won't ramble on about it. So let's have story time. Yeah. So we're going to talk about a dating experience of mine. As you've already heard me say, dating is a very interesting thing to me. Not that I don't like it, but it can just be a lot. Anyway, so let's set the scene. I am 18 years old. I'm a freshman in college, and there is this boy. And I even want to maybe just like back it up just a second. I told y'all I'm not great at telling stories, but like I don't know if anyone has ever watched Love on the Spectrum, right? And I'm sure there's critiques and all of that, but what I think is really cute is like you see these people and they're very like adamant about like falling in love, and just like, you know, they see somebody, they see their person, and like once they really like someone, like they're pretty like into it or loyal or whatever. So I also kind of experienced that in my life, and I call it like imprinting, like imprint on someone. So like yes, big Twilight vibes. So I get it imprinted on this dude even before like I got to college. Like as I had went there like as a senior or whatever, and he was like at this thing or whatever. So I remembered him. We're gonna call him Spicy Boy. Because that's what me and my roommate used to call him. But anyway, so like Spicy Boy, um, this was very early on, freshman year. So we went to a party. I was at a party, whatever, whatever. He walks me home. And, I invite him back inside. I'm drunk. He might be drunk. I don't know. Anyway, like we make out. It's cool. I'm like, all right, I'm in love with you. Like, let's do it. And so, like, I'm trying to like seduce him, and like he's not going for it. Like he's not going for it, and like, I mean, like not like being rude, but he's just like, oh no, like that's okay or whatever. And like, so he goes home, and so like, RSD came a knocking, and it came hard, and like. I was just like, I didn't understand. Like, I didn't understand, like, why he wouldn't want to sleep with me. Because, like, who doesn't want to sleep with me? No, I'm kind of kidding. Anyway, so, like, I was really confused. And then, like, I held myself to, like, such high standards, which high standards aren't an issue. But when there are gender standards that are imposed on you that, like, make you feel, like, less about yourself, or like lower your self-esteem, like that is an issue. So like at that point in time in my life, like, I felt like to be a good woman or like a desirable woman or yeah, to be a desirable woman, like I needed to be like totally shaved and every hair needed to be in place, and like all the pubes needed to be together, and like the pubes were not like together according to my standards, right? And so like I'm just like, oh my god, like he probably like hates me now, probably thinks I'm gross and like this kind of thing, blah 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 blah. So that happens. I see him, I don't know, maybe a day or so later or whatever, um, at the library, and so I don't know. Like I remember, like I looked at him and we made some eye contact, and like, well, I was already feeling bad about myself, already negative self talking, already perceived rejection. So then the eye contact to me was like really weird. So I thought he looked at me funny, and then I was just like, oh, so he doesn't like me or whatever. So then I was just weird around him, like pretty much from then on out, in any sort of like non-intoxicated situation. But then when I would be like drunk, it was a whole different story of like where I would just awkwardly flirt with him and things like that. And um I'm pausing because if there's like an overlap of things, as there often are with neurodivergent conditions. Um, so like one time, like we were like outside of a club or whatever, and like I went to he had very long hair and like he had like very long curly hair, so I like went to go like touch his hair. And first of all, that's rude. It's just rude. Like I don't know why I did that, but I was drunk and a child. So like, I went to go touch his hair or whatever, and like we weren't even cool because like of that whole like incident that like I started being weird about. And like so he's just like looking at me like, well, what the fuck is up with you? And like I like when he like turns around, like I'm just like a kid, like and like snatch my hand back and like gonna like, look away or like whatever. And so like that I don't think it's RSD. I think that is just I was drunk and then my inhibitions were lowered, so I didn't have the capacity to mask like I do when I'm sober. And then I was just trying to make friends in a very probably autistic way. So that's my opinion on that. But anyway, so it would just be like me like crying at his apartment when we would go like play games or like crying on street poles and things like that. And this happened like periodically over the course of like a couple of years. So like not that RSD like it was like one smooth like RSD episode, but just know that like it can continue, right? So, and it can sometimes take a while to recover from, depending on like, what it is. Um, so yeah, that was kind of like what would happen with him. And I remember like one time like talking to him, just like I don't even know what I said. I just remember like sitting on the side of his house and he was like very nice to me and I was just like sobbing and I'm just like I just liked him. I just liked him. I didn't know how to regulate those emotions or like handle that. And then like when I was sober, I would then like feel that RSD whenever I was around him because I was just like, how embarrassing, right? Like sober me could like conceptualize that. Yeah, so the kicker though is that like RSD or not RSD, the kicker is that like I don't think the rejection was ever real. Like I feel that it was totally perceived in the sense of like, well, we became cool as I got older, like out after college, and like things are fine now. But yeah, so I don't think it was really like ever like a real rejection. It was just I had all of these ideas about like what should happen. These social stories that I've kind of concocted, mostly probably from media, honestly. Um, and things didn't go my way. So then like yeah, I felt like this very like unbearable sort of rejection. And yeah, I would just be sad and cry and also be like stonewalling. And so that's just like an example of like how it doesn't necessarily have to be actual rejection. Like that choice to like, not sleep with me after walking me home when I was really drunk. Like kudos to you, spicy boy. Like gold star, I guess. I don't know if we deserve gold stars for not raping people, but like, but nonetheless, I think that was a kind gesture and very kind behavior. And so it was really hard to see that at that point in time. So anyway, moving on from the story, like RSD is not something that you really work on like in therapy because it's like very sudden. Like it's very like rapid and it kind of just like can kind of take over you and then like in a body-based way. So not we, because I don't prescribe meds, but in the field, it's usually treated with medication and I take meds for it. So um, I take guafacine. I think that might be how it's pronounced, but like the brand name is Intuit. So it's technically a blood pressure medication, but we can use it to help to calm our nervous systems and kind of prevent that sudden overwhelm. It also helps with my sensory sensitivities and kind of like muting those a little bit. It doesn't get rid of them, but it helps me like not actually be like pissed off. So that's really been helpful. And in general, just like meds have been really helpful. I also have gabapentin, which I'll take in an emergency. So it's like I guess I don't really know meds like that. Maybe I should have looked that up before I started recording, but do use it for like as needed anxiety medication to really calm me down if I'm feeling overwhelmed. But I will say, like, since taking meds and also, working with professionals and providers, um, my ability to self regulate my emotions um, and to self-regulate them without internalizing them. I think that's really important. Has tremendously improved because there was a period in my life where I thought like I was like very like emotionally like healthy, but I was really just internalizing a lot of stuff and like not speaking up for myself. And so that can be a really thin line to kind of navigate, especially for neurodivergent folks who may have difficulty in like those subtleties. So I think that's it. I think that's all I want to say about RSD. It's not like there's not a whole lot to talk about. But what I wanted to say too, like the podcast, like I said, I really want to talk about my experiences, right? And so I will kind of throw in some diagnostic criteria, like here and there as I see fit. But if you are just looking more for like psychoeducation on like these conditions and like what they look like and co-occurring things, like that's more gonna take place or the home for that is more on like the Instagram page. So follow NDT on IG. And it's in the show notes. So as I build that up, like when I release this episode, there probably won't be any sort of info on RSD on there just yet. But as I build it up, it will be more of an informative space and also an encouraging space. So I hope that is helpful, and I will talk to y'all soon. Peace.